Hello and welcome back to Ruben and Cut. Today I'm here to talk to you about push polling, this is embarrassing. I'm sorry. Ooh, I don't recognize that number. I'm gonna answer it here. Hello, yes. Uh-huh. Do I have time to take a quick survey? I'm in the middle of something, but you know what? Sure. I'll take a quick survey. Who do I plan to vote for? Well, I'm gonna be honest with you. Probably Biden. Definitely looking like Biden right now. Yeah, for sure. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Would I still vote for Biden if I heard from a man on the bus that Biden wanted to replace all the penises in America with schnauzer dogs? Mm. No, I have to say that would definitely sway my vote. Oh, I can't believe he wants to do that. I'll make sure to tell everyone I know that he wants to replace penises with schnauzer dogs. Ha! Crazy Democrats. I tell you, these. Wait a minute. Schnauzer dogs? Welcome back to Ruben Ryan's very special episode about the dangers of push polling. Now, you might be wondering, what does Ruben have to say about push polling? Well, first of all, let me tell you something. I used to work in polling, I used to do that job. So, first, I'm going to tell you a story about working the polls. And by that, I mean political polls, although also consumer polls as well. I'm going to throw out some things here to just tell you a little bit of my background in Poland. I used to work for a corporation whose name will remain nameless because I don't want any legal problems. But I worked there immediately after college. It was an all right job, didn't pay super great, and the incentive system seemed a little stacked against us. But what we did was essentially we were paid to call people and do phone polls and surveys. Now, typically, there were two kinds we did. One of them was product surveys. Typically, why did you cancel your cable? Actually, the very first day I was working the polls, that was what I was working on, finding out why people had canceled their cable. I shit you not, the very first person I got on the phone was a little old lady, and I was talking to her, and I was like, "Hey, why did you cancel your charter cable?" And her reason, and I'm not making this up, was because the Jews were listening to her through her TV. That was literally what she said. She also said that she got most of her news now from AM radio, although she was concerned about the amount of influence the Jews were getting there too. Yep, fun working the polls in America. On the flip side of this, I once called a Jewish person who angrily yelled at me, why would you call a Jewish home on Rosh Hashanah? In fairness, we as the polling company don't know you're Jewish. Just to let you know. However, in my time working the polls, now I want to state that the corporation that I worked for stated in their policy that they did not do push polls. That is a lie. We definitely did some push polls. Now, in fairness to the corporation that paid me, they didn't write any of the polls. I have done polls for numerous companies, including NBC/Wall Street Journal had a combo poll they like to put out. Everyone thinks of them as mainstream media, but let me tell you, they used to have a pretty big hate boner for Obama, just judging by the polls they were putting out. Now, in my time working, the vast majority of polls that I did were definitely paid for by Republicans. I found, interestingly enough, most of the liberally funded polls that we did were typically more things like local environmental issues, which seemed to be what Democratic corporations were more interested in putting their money into. However, aggressive amounts of Republican polling for candidates and whatnot was basically my everyday work. Not all of them were push polls, but some of them were. In fact, I once called Pennsylvania, when we were doing a whole thing trying to get this Democrat, I guess. Unfortunately for me, he was a Democrat who was actually very popular with Republican voters because of how connected he was to the coal industry. Yeah. And actually, I once talked to a Republican who called me out on this. In fact, his exact words to me were, "Hey, I see what you're doing. I just want to state that that guy's a good guy. I like what he does, and I don't appreciate that your poll is trying to slander him. However, I know it's not your fault, and I'm gonna complete the poll, which is the right thing to do, by the way. If you get a push poll, the right thing to do is to complete the poll and not allow it to change your answers, because some push polls, that's what they're looking for, which I'll go into in a minute." And props to that man. He went through the entire poll with me, and I couldn't blame him. It was definitely a push poll. And as I'm going to talk about in a moment, there are some very clear indicators that one is taking a push poll. Now, for those not familiar with a push poll, this is something I should probably explain here. The most famous push poll in documented history is, of course, the famous anti-John McCain poll from the 2000, so used to saying 20 at the beginning, from the 2000 Republican primaries. This was a very famous push poll that was put out by Karl Rove's evil genius against, at the time, candidate John McCain. Now, what is a push poll? A push poll is a poll that is designed to push ideas onto voters or to manipulate voters into changing their answers on the data, or to just flat out spread mis or disinformation. You see, leading up to the primaries between George W. Bush and John McCain, there were other people running too. But in this primary run, in John McCain's own home state, Karl Rove initiated a poll. This poll had a very pointed question on it, which was, would you vote for John McCain if you knew that John McCain had an illegitimate black daughter? The results, John McCain lost his home state. The thing about that is, his lack of an illegitimate black daughter. Of course, the disgusting part of this is that John McCain's black daughter was adopted, not from an affair. So, yeah. A push. Now, this is the most famous example of a push poll. But now you might be saying, Ruben, why'd you bring this up? Well, the answer is because I just took a push poll the other day. And you want to know what the biggest indicator that you're taking a push poll is? I'm going to go over all the indicators here in a second. But the biggest indicator that you're taking a push poll is if at some point in the survey, the person uses the phrase, if you heard, if you knew, if somebody told you, and then follows it up with a statement about a candidate and asks you if it would affect your vote. That is a push poll. Why is that? How do I know that's a push poll? Because if you put the phrase, if you heard, if you, on a sentence, it legally does not have to be true. That question is a hypothetical that is not being worded as a hypothetical. That's how they get you. Now, let's take a look at all the indicators that something is a push poll. This comes to us from pointer.org, and it's a comprehensive list of all the ways you can tell if something is a push poll. Some calls are push polls, political telemarketing that attempts to create negative views of candidates or issues. Others are legitimate message testing surveys. Okay, that's all we need to know is the push poll thing. Let's get into it. How can you tell the difference? Push polls. Oh, and actually, this is important. Others are legitimate message testing surveys used by campaigns to see which type of messages will be most successful. Here's how you can tell the difference. A push poll will often ask only one or very few questions, all about a single candidate or single issue. Not gonna lie to you, I find that vaguely misleading. Most of the push polls that I have done or have taken did ask multiple questions. However, they would focus in on a specific candidate. That part here is very right. I haven't taken many that just had one question. I also haven't given many that just had one question. All about a single candidate, because a push poll wants to influence your attitude on a specific candidate or specific subject. That is their goal. Usually ask questions that are strongly negative or sometimes uniformly positive, describing the candidate or issue. A true poll shouldn't be testing that, because a true poll is to get the opinion you already have. If a poll is attempting to present you with positive or negative information about a candidate, unless it is specifically worded to indicate that they want to know how you feel about the action and not the specific candidate or topic, that is an attempt to influence you. When a poll offers you negative or positive information about a topic, that is questionable, because a poll, like I said, is meant to gather your opinion you already have. It may not name the organization conducting the calls, or sometimes uses a phony name. In fairness to you, this is not always going to be obvious. It's very easy to make up phony names. When I was working in polling, we had our own company name, but we often would not. While we would sometimes be given the names of the poll we were working on, like the Wall Street Journal NBC one, or the Charter cable ones, or even the Walmart mom's exit polling survey. Yes, Walmart wants to know specifically how moms vote. That was an election day poll, by the way. They do not have to tell you the name, and they do not have to be honest about the name, unless people paying for the poll want you to know, like Walmart. They may not ask for demographic information. Now, I'll be straight up. Most polls are going to ask you for demographic information, even push polls. Not all push polls, but the push poll I took most recently did ask me for demographic information. That being said, it also did those first two things the whole way through. So they may or may not ask for demographic information. Can give evasive answers when you ask for information about the survey. Now, in fairness to the person who's giving you the poll, their answers may be evasive because they literally have been given zero answers to your questions. I know I was rarely given any answers to the questions, and the person who just gave me a push poll the other day did not have any answers to my questions. But that's okay. I saw through their push poll immediately. Okay, I'm not gonna lie. Some of the signs on this list I don't think are super great. Like, usually call very large numbers of people, sometimes many thousands. Like, first of all, yes, push polls would do that. In fairness, you, the person answering the call, don't know that. I don't know how you could possibly get that information. They do not use a random sample. Once again, this is something that's going to be very, very, very difficult for you to find the information. Most of these actually are not going to help you determine it's a push poll, I'm finding. But it is worth noting that this is true. When I used to give push polls, they were typically based off of voter rolls. These are not going to be cold calls. You donated money somewhere, or they got you directly off of a voter roll. I have been getting some text messages that leads me to believe I signed up for something Republican recently, accidentally. So that's quite possibly where this push poll got my information. But yes, polls and surveys are rarely ever, in general, doing cold calling, because cold calling is not as legal as it used to be. Rarely, if ever, report results. Now, push polls might report results because some push polls' goals are they will start off by asking you, would you vote for X candidate if elections were held today? And you will say yes or no. And if you say yes, they'll continue on to the push poll and proceed to give you a series of negative things, like, if you heard that Sherrod Brown wanted to give trans affirming care to all teenagers in Ohio, would you still vote for him? See, that's a wildly outlandish statement. However, it's the type of thing that, because of the way it's worded, somebody might change their answer from yes, I am planning to vote for Sherrod Brown to no, I will not vote for Sherrod Brown. You see how that works? Those push polls might reveal your data, might reveal that the end result was you changed your thing to not voting for, even if you said voting for at the beginning, because that's one of the things a push poll wants you to do, is to change your opinion about a candidate. That being said, a lot of push polls don't necessarily reveal their data to the public because their real purpose is to send out misinformation. Their real purpose is to get your brain to latch on to a made-up hypothetical that is highly negative or just misleadingly worded. Once again, if you're taking a poll and you hear the phrase, if you heard, like that's the big one, if you heard, that poll is bullshit. Like right off the top, if the phrase, if you heard, comes up, just assume that whatever they're about to say is either a lie or misrepresented on some level, because that's how it works. Now, message testing is another type of polling, usually based on a random sample of voters, which means it's still not completely cold calling. They're going off a voter roll. And they're looking to get Democrats and Republicans because they want to know how people feel about these things. The number of you're not going to know this. I don't know why they're bothering to list these things. This is like more information that's useful if you are giving the polls. Usually contains more than a few questions. Fair. Including demographic data. Once again, I will say that I disagree with this list on this point. Some push polls will ask you for demographic data. And whether this is because they actually do plan to use the altered data for something, or if they want to have the more appearance of respectability. If they're doing this through a legitimate polling company, like I used to work for, the push poll will need to have some resemblance of legitimacy and will often share results on request. That's interesting. I've never asked a poll for the results before. Do that. I actually will encourage you to do that. This was taken from Understanding and Interpreting Polls, International, Self-Directed Course of Pointer News U. I don't like the way that sounds. Developing a partnership with American Association of Public Opinion Research. And some other companies there. The big takeaway that I want you to put in your mind is, as we're moving into the election cycle, when you get a poll, the big thing I want you to start listening for is how the questions are worded. First of all, a poll's goal should be to gain your opinions, nothing else. It should not attempt to influence your opinions. So if they offer you negative or positive information, they are trying to influence either your answers or your overall opinions. If they phrase anything in a phrase that uses hypothetical language, once again, this is things like, if you heard, if you were told, if statements like this do not have to be true. And that's the biggest takeaway. If it starts with, if you heard, assume it is a lie. And honestly, that's the best advice I can give you. That being said, if you do find yourself on a push poll, I encourage you to finish it. Now, you could just hang up. However, on the offside that they actually do intend to use that data for something, I encourage you to take it and just make sure you stick to your original opinions of whatever candidate they're talking about, regardless of what they say. I've never been a big I don't trust polls 100%. Not all polls are bad. Not all polls are dishonest. But I've worked in that industry, and I can tell you that some of them are these. Some of them are push polls. So all I can say is when push comes to shove, stay alert. Keep your ears open. Critically think about the questions you are being asked. Not only the questions themselves, but how they are asked of you. Got that? Lock it in. You got to stay vigilant out there, people. Anyways, thank you for joining me on this, what I assume is a relatively short episode of Ruben Uncut. Please like and subscribe on YouTube. Maybe ring that bell, leave a comment or two. If you enjoyed it, obviously. And you can email the program at rubenuncut@gmail.com. Although, what are you, an old person? You can also enjoy this podcast, because this is technically a podcast, wherever you can get podcasts. And by that, I mean Spotify and various other places that are stealing my RSS feed. I'm on to you guys. I'm on some places legitimately too. But anyways, thank you for joining me. Have a wonderful whatever, wherever, whoever you are.